Please make welcome James from Fido Green.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Firstly, let me commend all of you, all of us being here together today on a Sunday at lunchtime. It's cold, so this is pretty cool what's going on. And as Damon was touching on just before, just the fact of educating ourselves and becoming more aware in this current climate is really a powerful thing, and the ripple effects that can come of this. I work at Fido Green. Scott Sherwood will be joining me shortly. He is my manager, and I highly encourage you to really get amongst it with Scott when he gets here. He also helped create the curriculum with Melbourne University on greening built structures. But I'll introduce myself. I've got over 10 years in the industry, the garden landscape industry, ranging from setting up retaining walls and mowing lawns all the way through to now installing the gardens and maintaining them. So I'm aware of all the different vulnerabilities in the different climate settings of gardens, and I do encourage you to let me know what kind of situations you find yourself in the garden world. It's actually an easy topic to talk about. It's scientifically proven that being in and amongst plants and the garden environment is healthy. It feeds the positive hormones. So lucky with that, and I'm going to assume on that note that everyone here has a garden or a plant in some way that they caretake. Am I accurate with saying that? Is there anyone here that doesn't have a plant at their house? Yes, that's what I was thinking. So before Scott gets here and we really get into the slideshow that we had set up here, I did want to find out who we have in the audience today. So you've all come here with a sustainable-minded focus. What is your vision for your place or your living environment moving forward? What do you like about your current setup? Can I ask if anyone lives in an area that has a vertical garden? No one here? All right, cool. That's very cool. Because, excuse the pun, it is a growing industry, and I think we're going to find more and more of that. In fact, I now see them as mini farms because it's very easy to propagate and just plant them back in. So it's pretty cool in the communal settings that a lot of these are finding themselves in new buildings, to see a lot of the residents getting in amongst it and consciously trimming. I encourage you here today, look at all the variety of plants around the place. Most of them is what I would call is asexual, which means that they will propagate easy. Propagating is really simple. If you're not already aware of it, you just take a cutting, you chuck it into some water and just watch Mother Nature take its place. I've done experiments on how lazy I can be with propagating, and I literally can be completely lazy. I've got a bucket over there I'll bring up soon. That bucket there, I would have had some leftover cuttings at the bottom of a bag and chucked them in, let the rain be there, and a year down the track, these plants have only had that little bit of rain that is sustained. Thank you. And a little bit of light. I'm not even talking a huge amount of light at our yard, so I'll just pull out this one here. Check out, that's a cutting. So you can imagine it's got no root structure at all, and it's facing all the elements. One of the things, Damon, I really liked he touched on was, see, we're in a situation that there's lacking biodiversity. I'll just chuck this now. Growing urban environments mean that you have to sacrifice some kind of our environment. We're already in a stage where there's so much monocultures going on, monoculture farming, lack of biodiversity in our environment, which basically what that means is when you open up the door here, you get in a lot of pests and fungal diseases that aren't controlled by typical controls that you would find in a very healthy setting where there's lots of biodiversity and natural predatorial situations. So the fact that you can take a cutting, leave it in a bucket under those kind of settings, that's how resilient we're looking at our plant life. What Scott and I aim to do in our talk today is we want to demystify the challenges that we can face in just owning a plant. The benefits are profound in terms of what can come of having plants in our environment. So I just want to make that more approachable, and Scott shares that vision too. Now, who has potted plants inside? And is there anyone who finds it a challenge to caretake for that potted plant? Okay. How long have you had them for? Oh, sweet. Okay. So what kind of challenges are we facing? You forget to broaden them. Okay. Well, that's a pretty good one to overcome. I didn't catch your name before. Koke? Yeah. Thank you. Now, we were chatting before about a good problem to have is underwatering your plants. It's better to underwater them than overwater them. What can happen if there's not enough oxygenation or porosity in your mix, which is a lot of the potting mix that you get when you buy from a nursery is pretty low in its quality. And what can happen there is there's not much porosity or capacity for the roots to breathe. If you overwater or overlove your plant in that department, fungal diseases can occur. Whereas if you can see this one here is starting to wilt. This has been sent up from Victoria last week. I actually haven't watered it because I don't want it to be leaking everywhere. This plant will be fine if I continue to let it dry out for a period of time. But if I overwater it and it doesn't have the capacity to breathe. So you've actually got a good problem there. So I do encourage everyone here to err on the side of under-loving your plants in that respect and letting them talk to you. Has anyone gone so far as to research how much plants like to communicate in their environment? It goes a little bit esoteric, but there's some pretty cool YouTube videos out there in that plants like to sing, and they do fear when other plants nearby them are being cut. They fear the person who cuts them, which makes it pretty challenging when I'm aware of that, and I'm in the maintenance industry as well, but you just got to get your blinkers on. All right, so is there any developers in the room that has got any projects that they want to incorporate more greenery into what they're doing? On that note then, I will get into it, but I do encourage you to stop me at any point and get me answering your questions. All right, who is Fighter Green? We've been around for 18 plus years. We're not too afraid to suggest that we have learnt from our failures. In the first few years, we definitely had some unsuccessful projects. Jeff, our head owner, started out in a very humble setting of just being asked to set up a green wall near a railway, and then consequently from there playing around with different materials. Our materials that we use, they are recycled PET. They're not a rare product by any means, but so we're not necessarily pioneering the industry in terms of the products that we're using. There have been some smaller companies that have got out there and played around with these products beforehand. But what we're finding is that we've got a methodology now that is really like a thriving methodology. So this PET fabric that we use here, the potted plant vertical gardens, it allows for the root systems of all the plants to grow through. I'm not sure if we're all familiar with the plant's capacity to talk to each other. So this is a really unique setting these kind of walls, and again, there are the companies that are using these, but it allows for the plants to be able to talk to each other, and that is in itself a form of pest control. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the fact that big trees will mother their juveniles. So they, through the, I can't think of the name now, but through the fungal network underneath the soils, basically the mum will send nutrients and it will know specifically where its juveniles are, ensuring that any excess glucose or energy is shared there. Now, what have we got? We've got 45 staff nationally. This is normally where Scott normally takes the podium, but he'll be joining me soon. So he could probably elaborate when he gets here on this area. Why have gardens on a built structure? There are many benefits. Damon's spoken about a lot of the health benefits and also lowering pollutants in the environment. We also have cleaner water runoffs, again, bringing biodiversity back into the built areas. Apart from that, it's now a social setting and an attractive setting as well. It increases local shopping and marketability of the building as well. So, Biophilic Design. Now, Matilda will be speaking later on biophilic design in architecture on buildings. It's a really fascinating concept, and I think it's a pivotal time in our history to start bringing in these concepts. Not only does it help us reconnect to nature, but it draws upon what a fellow called Edward Wilson made very popular in 1980, is the theory that humans are innately drawn to the natural world. Actually, I do encourage you to follow Damon Gamo on his Instagram. Recently, in one of his feeds, he spoke about how there's a tribe called the Ashwa tribe. They don't even believe that nature exists. That's how in it they are. There's nothing separate to them. So scientifically proven that we are wired to think nature, be around nature, and be connected to nature. So bringing that back into the built environment. Now, in a poll in 2019, the city of Sydney wanted to hear back from the residents what the city of the future was to look like for them. And the overwhelming response back from the residents of Sydney was that they wanted the city to be greener with trees and plants, and also that they wanted the local government to be environmentally responsible. So they have in turn acted on that. There is some alarming statistics too that a lot of our government would be aware of too in what Damon was pressing on as well, is that currently as humanity uses 1.68 times Earth's capacity for renewable resources and also waste management. G'day, Scotty. Please welcome into the room Scott Sherwood here. He actually is on time where we've been moved forward. And I wouldn't mind him introducing Fido Green freshly as well, because this is a very knowledgeable man.
Sorry, I'm late.
You're actually not late, Scotty. We've been chatting.
Have I missed much?
Well, we can come back to this. I haven't really touched on this slideshow yet, but let's go back to, who are we, Scotty?
Where did you get up to?
No, literally, I was about to talk about financial. So I would like you to talk about who is Fido Green, who are you,
Perfect. So my name is Scott Sherwood. I'm the National Maintenance Manager for Phytogreen. So essentially, once we construct our projects, I look after them all across Australia. So we've got teams in Queensland, here in Sydney. Our major base down is in Victoria and Adelaide as well. So we do roof gardens, vertical gardens, planter boxes. Essentially, anywhere where it's really hard to put plants, we decide to do that and then look after it. Did you chat about desal at all?
Go for it.
So our probably most well-known project is the Victorian Desalination plant, and that's a giant roof garden down at Wonthaggi, and it's the largest roof garden in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's 27,000 square metres, or 2.7 hectares, on a profile that's about 150 mil thick, using just local Indigenous species on an area about within sort of 40 kilometres of that area. Phytogreen has been going since 2002, and we would say we are the industry leader and probably the largest supplier of vertical gardens and roof gardens. I think we've supplied now over 650,000 square metres of roof gardens and probably over about 70,000 metres of vertical gardens as well, which is now as well moving into planter boxes and hanging gardens. I don't know if Jimmy let you know. So we built all the gardens around here at Coroma, this total internal landscape, which has been going now for about 3 years. Thankfully, everyone loves it around here. I think that's the main parts about Phytogreen. And then I'll let Jimmy continue.
No, it's glorious. We'll continue from where we left off. So the City of Sydney is aware of the predicament that we face environmentally. And has obviously done that kind of a poll, as I was saying. So there's grants available. If you've got developments happening or you have considered in your mind what is possible to add to your current dwelling, or if you even know someone, I would encourage them to get online, check out thecityofsydney.com, because there are many grants that you can apply for. The photo that you can see up there is a building. It's a 1950s building in St Kilda East. Basically, what this is eliciting us up here is letting you know that old buildings can be retrofitted. What this building used to look like on the top of it was just a really plain, heat-attracting, boring-looking roof that all the residents got together and they wanted to change that. So they applied for a grant with the local government there, and was it $200,000?
It was.
Yes, so they got approved a grant, which was, out of all the grants that they applied for, the one that they got approved for was improving the water quality back into the system. And Phytogreen were involved in the project, and now they've got, you can see there the veggie garden there. They've got a communal setting that they hang out in. So it's a social space now. It's a space where they can put their feet into the earth. We're only just starting to see all the health benefits of just putting your feet in the earth. So you've got that in your living environment. On top of that, one of the key selling points, even if you were to go on now, there's an apartment selling, and the key selling point is the fact that there's a rooftop garden. So there is that marketability factor.
If you want to move to Melbourne, that is.
Yeah. All right. Have you got anything else there?
I mean, you're doing a great job.
Thanks, Scotty. All right. Behind, we can see a picture that shows a significant difference in the temperature on the outside of a building with foliage and not. 20 degrees is a very significant temperature difference. I remember in Newcastle, there was this really stinking hot day, and I had plants that were on a window side. The window obviously magnified the heat on this hot day. It got up to 54 degrees in this area. The plants literally scorched it. But we'd had hot days before that, and the plants were fine. So I guess I'm illustrating how much 20 degrees can be. That was only like a 10-degree difference had such a effect there. But what you get here is you get a cooling effect of the building, so there's less energy consumption within the building. You've also got cleaner water runoffs. from the building. And you've also got sound dampening by the foliage being on outside the building there. Not only that, you introduce birds and biodiversity into the area. So you've got the bird sounds that can happen right there in your urban dwelling.
I think one of the other big factors as well, which I don't know if anyone's been in the city on a windy day, just those wind tunnels that move through the buildings and how cold that can be and really the damaging it can be. And by having more plant life around, we can really actually soften that air movement, and we can also channel our air movements when cities are designed. So just by adding extra plant life really adds major beneficials to an overall cityscape as well.
Yep. And also with some of our heavier rainfalls that we're starting to see these days, it does reduce or stagnate the stormwater buildup as well. So you don't get the flash floods that you can be savvy to and the bacteria that can come up from the sewage system like that. So we're finding that there's social and well-being benefits as well. Now, the thing I was going to say, I'm going to draw upon my notes here because I did like that. If we're in urban settings that are going to be developing, and it's predicted that 67% of our global population is going to be in urban dwellings by 2050. What that looks like is a growing space of an urban environment. If it's not buffered, we're losing our biodiversity in that region, but we're also having our connection to nature, our spots of nature diminished or challenged. We can look at the recent lockdowns in Victoria as to the effects of the challenges that can face there. Kids Helpline revealed that over the last year, with the lockdowns in Victoria, their intervention on youth suicide rates had tripled, which is a pretty sad stat there. But conversely, we've got studies that show that people who live on forest fringes have got very healthy amygdala or amygdala functioning in the brain, which is the region of the brain responsible for memory and emotions. I think you've got a very healthy amygdala functioning. This is someone here, you just get him speaking and he's got an amazing capacity to retain information, and he's also very lighthearted and bubbly to be around.
Are you saying that's just because of the plants?
It could be. Studies have shown that it could be.
I think one of a really interesting study that we've seen just of the benefits of plants was Kansas State University. They did a study with post-surgery patients, and they split the group up, and they had a number of patients that were in rooms with plants and a number of patients that were in rooms without plants. And they actually found that the patients that were in the room with the plants actually healed quicker and also used less pain medication. They actually found that they were caring for the plants, watering and moving them around with the lights. And when they asked, what was the most favourite thing about the room, they said the plant. And then the people that were in the room without the plants basically said that the favourite thing was the TV, and there was a slight disconnect there. So I think there's other studies that have been done with that as well, but just by having plants around, it's that benefit that I guess we, just that connection with nature and that feeling that we don't need as much pain medication. And it's, whether you look at the healing properties of having them around. We
had in the room yesterday, I'm not sure if we have today, any architects. I don't think we do. No, we discussed that. So there's Amanda Sturgeon, who is a leading biophilic design architect, and she writes in her book, The Living Building Challenge, that biophilic design engages the intuitive, instinctive, and happier nature within us. And I have to say that's my direct experience with working in the garden world. By starting out laying astroturf and doing retaining walls, my experience of the natural world was one of something that was heavy, cold, itchy, a bit boring. I didn't like being in the garden. It was something that was a bit of a challenge for me to overcome. But after a couple of years, I noticed that I was really starting to think about the garden. I would get home from work and I would still be working in the garden. I daydream about nature. I like to breed butterflies now. I enjoy nature's sweetness, resilience, and its responsiveness. To be able to take a plant that is weeping or, not thriving, and then to be able to adjust its setting to watch it thrive again, that's a really good feeling for me. And I have to say, symbiotically, I think my nature and my personality has shifted since when I first started working in the garden world. My partner, she's not able to make it earlier, but she would probably suggest that the progression that I've taken is that I'm less reactive, I'm more responsive, and I'm sweeter, maybe.
I think Jimmy's trying to say if you have a grumpy partner, just buy them a plant.
Yeah, well, that's how Phytogreen deal with excess stress levels. They know too well how effective it is. They just like, all right, Jimmy, go on a maintenance job, just be in the garden. So, bastards.
All right, so I think Jimmy's done a great thing explaining about the benefits of plants. So I think we can show you some of the projects that we've installed, some of our larger projects, and also, I guess, how that can correlate to, doing something at home, which doesn't have to be a vertical garden at home, really just bringing more plants into your house and just having that, because as much as we are here to promote, vertical gardens and everything, we are just trying to promote people to feel comfortable with plants, that plants are easy to look after. I know everyone says they got a brown thumb, but it's just choosing the right plant for your own sort of space and, really how far you want to take it. And so when we look at vertical gardens, I think vertical gardens can go anywhere, inside, outside, plants survive. People, like some of the things that people say, oh, it's too hot there, plants can't survive. Plants survive in the desert. Plants survive everywhere. That's just, they have developed that. It's just making sure that you understand the environment that you're going to put your plants. I think a funny thing that I had a friend, they had bought some plants and then came to us, I tried them and they died. And I was like, oh, well, where were they? I was like, I was just in my bedroom. It's like, oh, do you have any light in there? They're like, oh, no, it's an indoor plant. I was like, this is well, no, it's like their windows. No, it's like, well, there's no such thing as an indoor plant. But plants have developed to live in low light conditions. So when we look around Coroma here, a lot of the plants that you see here are what you would see at the bottom of a rainforest, lower canopy plants. So making sure that environment allows you to choose those right plants for that. As well with vertical gardens is maintenance, is making sure that you can get to it. When they're on the ground, they're very easy. When they're 20, 30 metres up in the air, it makes it a little bit more difficult, which is some fun places to do, hanging off the side of building in ropes and building maintenance units. And really understanding as well, when looking about putting a vertical garden in, what your host wall is, what your load bearing is. You can put a wall on a concrete wall like that. You can use timber. There's different things. I mean, that's, if anyone wants to talk about it afterwards, looking at an area, that's fairly easy. And then as well, I think people always think that they have to use native plants. Like native plants are great, but you want to use a mix of tropical plants as well. Trying to really create biodiversity is actually having plants that flower over different parts of the year. So that way you're constantly got food for plants to feed off. As caterpillars, sometimes people hate having caterpillars around, but that it's feeding. It's not really going to hurt the plant too much, and that becomes a moth or a butterfly. Jimmy hates having to get rid of caterpillars on some of our projects because he likes to keep them so he can breed them. But having that mix of species, which is you'll see with some of these projects, we try and put as many different species in our walls as well. It also makes them more resilient because we've had walls where people have only wanted a single species in there, and if you get a pest or something happens, you can lose a whole wall. There's DYRSL, I don't know if anyone's been up there. There's a vertical garden all along the front there. We installed that. We still look after it, but that was installed with one species. We tried to recommend them at the start, don't do that. It's a terrible idea, but they were, no, we just want this one fern. Anyway, whitefly got in and decimated the whole wall, and we had to replant that. Now it's got about, 40 different species in it, and there's much more resilient. So if you are looking at a vertical garden, chuck as many plants in as you can, or different sort of species. So There are many different systems of vertical gardens. So we have a foam and felt-based system, but there are pot-based systems. These are really good for the home gardener, especially edible gardens, because they're a high organic mix within your pot. So you get a higher plant turnover and also a degradation of your organic matter. So I don't know if anyone has houseplants at home. You chuck some potting mix in, and then about 6 months later, that's dropped about halfway. That's fine in a pot because it's easy to change. We try and stay away from that when up on commercial sized buildings. We try and stick to as least organic as possible just because you have to refill it. It's really easy once you've got cranes and scaffolding, but afterwards it's very hard to replenish that as much as possible. And so I mentioned about maintenance. Now this is more on a commercial aspect, is really the cost of maintenance. And as much as I like to say chuck plants everywhere, if it's going to cost too much, then you really shouldn't do it. And a great example is an install that we did, and they hate me showing this photo, but did anyone watch the block in 2012? Sky High, yes, with the green walls all over it. We won't be doing work with the block again because that was a terrible experience. But we tried to push it in a certain direction, but they wanted to put these tiny little gardens all around. You needed electrical permits, you needed basically one of the largest booms in Melbourne, footpath permits. Basically for the 5 apartments for those tiny little gardens, it cost $30,000 a year to look after. So across 5 apartments, that's $6,000 a year, which was a stupid price. So they didn't want to look after maintenance anymore. Then eventually the drip trays got chocked up and started overflowing. Then someone thought the best idea to stop the water overflowing was just to turn the water off. And then now we exist with a totally dead garden. So I like to just put that up and just showing that, if you want to put plants in an area and it's going to cost too much, you don't have to. It's choose something that's going to be viable, because when we put plants on walls, we want them to be hopefully up there 20, 30 years. We want the industry to exist. Unfortunately, the industry is quite young, and if someone gets burnt by, they put the wrong project up or it costs too much, and then it fails, then they'll just say greening on buildings doesn't work. It's too expensive. It's not like buying, say, a crappy fridge or a bad car and it breaks down. Oh, well, I bought a cheap one and it's failed and I'll get another one. Generally, with green infrastructure, if it fails, then they won't do again. So that's the big thing that I try and push, is just do it. We want to do it, but also we want it to be viable in the long run. I guess this is another good example of also choosing the right system for the right environment. The Patrick Blanc green wall system is an amazing system, but an amazing system pretty much for the European environment. It doesn't work well here in Australia. And unfortunately, One Central is a prime example of that. I don't know if anyone's walked around it recently. It's about, of those 1,200 square metres of vertical garden, I think there's about 20% that's alive. Look, that's just a learning curve, I think, within the industry that people need to learn. But I think, when looking at systems, you want to make sure that it's something that's been designed in here in Australia for the Australian climate, that it has that resiliency. So hopefully it will come back. I think it will do because of the size of the project, but just things to sort of think about.
I think that's what I really love about Fighter Green too, is that when you engage with our team, we do have the ethos of, anything is possible, which can be very scary working within the company. But at the same time, we are research and we do have experts in the different areas of the fields coming to collate on that. And that's what I would encourage you to do in any project that you undertake, investing in green work, is just making sure that you do have that research in place as to not just how it's going to look for the first 2 years, but how it is going to look down the track. I've worked on so many, even just backyard landscape projects where no doubt the project looks sublime for the first 2 years, but then you start to see it all just break down. And it's just bringing that accountability back to the initial conversation, and what they can project in terms of what's going to happen maintenance-wise down the track.
Lovely said. This is just a small picture. I guess this is more commercial based, but just showing that you don't need soils for plants to live in. Everyone thinks, you need soil. You can grow plants in different forms of media, foam, felt. You can just grow plants in water. Jimmy's actually got a perfect example here of just These plants,
showing them our little babies here.
yeah. So these are just cuttings from our walls that probably 6 months old that are just at the back of our yard that we've just chucked in some buckets, pretty much just for us at home, just so when we can plant up. But plants are fairly resilient and they don't, you can use different forms, you can play around. There was a stand here showing some good hydroponics, but are they here today?
I don't think they've come.
Is the hydroponics guy here today? Oh, never mind. But yeah, so you don't need soils to grow. So we try and go with less organics as much as possible, and you can actually see the root systems penetrating through the foam, and then we just feed our fertilizers through our irrigation system, and that's a really sustainable way. As I said, we're hoping for our vertical gardens to be up 20, 30, like longer, 40, 50 years. Our oldest project at the moment, I think, is 15 years that's been up from one of our original projects, and yeah, it just keeps getting better and better. So this project is down in Melbourne. So this is Loop. I don't know if anyone's been to the Loop bar down in Melbourne in the CBD on Myers Place. It's got a fantastic roof garden, but this project was part of the city of Melbourne. They had an urban forestry fund. So basically that meant that if you wanted to put a green project up, a green roof, green wall, they would pay half the bill, or if you wanted to double the size of it, they would pay that extra money. Really just trying to push to get that greening in, and I can show you the install here of basically a blank wall and then what that became. Now, this is another great example that we mentioned before, that green walls don't have to go on new buildings. That building is about 100 years old. It's double brick, and really it took 2 weeks to do the install. Pretty much 3/4 of that was actually just re-engineering the building. And that's just, when we did the engineering report, even though it was double brick, we weren't too sure of the structural integrity of that. So we basically just had to go and core drill through a number of the bricks and basically do a brick tie, which is just like a chem set rod in there. And then we're able to get all our plants up there. So that's about 40 square meters with 1,200 plants and 80 different species in that wall. And as part of, with the City of Melbourne, we tried to strip back the maintenance as much as possible. And so we only visit that twice a year in a scissor lift, and then we visit monthly just to top up our fertilisers. But with this, we're just trying to sort of show that, you can do green walls in areas that's a north facing, that cops blasting sun, but also cops full wind and the winter cold. So having that knowledge and that correct choice, you can make something that's thriving. So it's doing great. It's actually gets to a point now where the root systems that are actually at the top are almost touching the ground, and it's just this amazing sort of jungle effect. We have to trim them back now because when people do come out of the bar, they do try to swing on it. So we've learned that, not to keep them to grow to the ground.
That's the other thing too. I love about these felt setups is that they are compartmentalized. That there's not so much competition between the plants. Obviously, those ones were getting pretty mature there, and they were probably growing behind the walls down in between the brackets there. But each plant has got its own little section where it can get what it needs. One of the challenges it could face is just a lack in design element, in that the plant above it could grow and its canopy could suffocate the light coming to it. But typically, if the design is taken into account using these panels, they're really good for what would you say, your less muscly plants to live alongside a more vulnerable plant species?
Oh yeah, we use about 1,300 different species now of a mixture. So the list is endless there of what you can see. With this project here, this is in our docklands down in Melbourne. So this is COPs, full winds, salty winds, and pretty much only the wall there on the right cops the sun for about an hour of the day. It's all just reflective light. We've got 40 different species there. There's Monstera deliciosa, some larger phyllos, we've got lots of Nematanthus, lots of Ripsalis, even some orchids in there. And it's just showing that, yeah, you can be in the worst place. And generally around this area, the only other species that you see on the ground is Lomandra and plane trees, because that's just what people can think can survive in that area. But we've got, upwards of 40 different species here that are thriving in this area. And if you ever get to go have a look at it, it's looking fantastic.
And just that was what we were talking about earlier with outside of this room, in the surrounding environments, the lack of biodiversity that's used, and how whilst there can be a minimal amount of predatorily good things that fly in to the room, the amount that can come from that biodiverse environment back out to the surrounding environment is a really good thing, and can counteract a lot of the problems that the surrounding gardens are facing as well.
So this is another project that we did, which was really trying to push how low light we could work. So this is Tower 4. It's 463 square metres. And it's over 14 stories. I think it's nearly 53 metres tall. So it's the tallest vertical garden in Australia. We run off, I don't know if anyone's familiar with lighting, but generally when we say plants indoors, we look for a minimum 3,000 lux. To give it, basically lux is just the brightness of light. To give a good example, outside on a peak summer day, you're generally getting about 400,000 lux. This garden was actually designed to exist on 1,500 lux, so basically halving the lighting levels just because of the size and the space. And we actually, with the water as well with this garden, we capture all of the water that we use to irrigate the vertical garden down on tanks basically underneath the garden, and then it is recirculated back up. And we have a mains top up just because the plants do actually use some of that water. And we estimate it uses about 500 litres a day of potable water. And across the garden, it uses about 2,500 litres a day, but of that just being 500, it's only using about 1 litre per square metre per day of potable water. So it's another thing that we're trying to push as well, that when people look at green infrastructure, like it uses so much water, it's wasting water. With a thought out design to what you want to do, it doesn't have to be using that. This is another interesting project because it is actually considered a fire hazard to the building. So it has giant sprinklers, and the Melbourne Fire Brigade were so afraid that if there is no water to the garden for 8 hours, 5 fire trucks will come out to come have a look at it. So we designed a fire panel system that basically gives us alerts. It could not have water for 5 days and it would still be fine just because of the relative humidity within the area. But that's been probably the most challenging aspect, I think, with greenery over the last sort of 5 years has just been our fire regulations coming in. I mean, if anything, it's going to be a fire dampener because of the moisture, because of the plant life. But when they do fire testing, they basically strip it back to when it is completely dry. It's a fire hazard. I mean, if it was completely dry, I'd have bigger problems because the whole thing would be dead. But that's just a part of the things that are sort of changing here. And it's really fun, 3 a.m. getting an alert that it hasn't watered. Now, up in Queensland, this was Queensland's largest vertical garden up until last month when we finished installing. So this is 220 square metres. There's 3 different vertical gardens. There's one around the other side and one on the inside. But we just recently installed Manning Street, which is 410 square metres of plant life, but it's actually spread across 600 square metres, which is fully fire compliant as well. And again, this is just showing, that's basically a west-facing wall. It's not in the sun for 3/4 of the day, but in the afternoon, it cops full blasting sun. And we've actually, with the design of this wall, you can actually see the canopies on the side of the wall to actually stop the wind movement that allows us to have a lot more intricate species within the design. Yeah.
So that there is our fire compliant backing there.
Essentially, that's an aluminium backing. So we used to use core flute, but now that's considered flammable and will sort of catch fire. So now we switched over to aluminium, which is, it passes all the current sort of regulations that's changing, which is allowing us to go bigger and bigger with projects. So Aria, who developed this project, this was the first building that they decided to put greenery on. So when they develop a project, they bring a builder on, but they also manage the project afterwards. And since then, we've now done 6 or 7 projects with them. And what they've found is that by putting greenery on the buildings, their apartments are actually selling 3 times faster to their previous buildings. And they're also, the value, I think, is upwards of 20% per apartment that they're getting because of that greenery factor. So that is the internal garden that we have there. This is, I don't know if anyone's has like an apartment block and they have those little lobby areas. There's a couple of couches, a couple of chairs. You ever see anyone sitting there? There's never anyone there. It's like a token gesture. People always hang out in this spot. By just having that greenery, it changes what would be a useless area or a token gesture to actually like a meeting spot where people want to hang out, and you just feel that sort of calming nature by having the plants around there. So much that we have to sort of push people out of the way when we have to come maintain it. So
yeah, literally at a place at Dickadata out at Kurnell, we've got 4 decent sized walls there in an office setting, and it's the green wall man's here. The green wall man is like, you get everyone coming around with their little bottles and can I have a cutting. And so, which is pretty cool. And you often walk by and you see lots of cuttings on their desks, and it is exciting to see what kind of a difference that can make to a space.
I think Jimmy's also offering, if anyone is keen for any cuttings today of some of the lovely plants here, we can
for sure.
we can help you out there. I'll just show you a couple of more of our commercial projects, and then I'll show you some of our residential projects, because while we have giant projects, we can do smaller projects. These are a couple of ones here in Sydney. That's at a couple of gym. Another one that's at Glamico, which is just a beauty shop. And then this is Manning Street on the right that we just finished installing. So I was up in Queensland to help with the installation of that. It took us about a month. It was about 3 weeks to put that up, which was really fun, really challenging as well, just trying to move within the area, but really looking forward to having that grow over the next sort of 20 years. But like, it's already from that picture that was taken about a month ago, it's almost like it's doubled with that rate of growth that it's put it on. And we pre-grew that for about 6 months before putting it in. And by pre-growing the plants, it really just adds to that resiliency. There's some more projects. There's Amex Lounge in Sydney, which unfortunately we don't get to as much because the airport is closed, so no one really goes out there. Jimmy did go the other day and it was looking a little bit rough for not seeing for 4 months, but we're hopefully, once international travel does come back, we can get that looking back to its former glory.
Well, the other thing that was in its challenge was you got restricted airflow too. There's no aircon or anything working in that setting because there's no one there. And that is a vulnerable thing for plants. You want your light, your water and your airflow to be working in conjunction with each other.
Also, trying to get into the airport with sharp objects makes it a little bit harder as well. Here are some other projects, residential apartments just out the front that we've installed. And now this is just in sort of someone's courtyard. So I've shown you lots of big and exciting projects, but this is what can be done just within a courtyard setting. And the great thing about green walls is you're not taking up any real estate, that you would be hanging out in. You're basically using that vertical space. So you're just maximizing the use of an area. You can see here, it just totally transform what's hitting it. What would just be sort of plain brick face, I mean, you can make it sort of nice, but by just adding that plant life in there, you're just totally transforming the space to what it is. Look, if anyone's really interested in learning about our panels, we can go off to the side. I can show you.
We dabbled in it before you got here.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did.
Missed out.
They're also very absorbing of water, and that's one way that it can just spread across the wall.
So that's just a good example that, if you have a backspace, you put the panels up, you plant it up, and then it'll just start to do its thing. Especially and that's, after 6 months, what it can become. And then as well, we can run through maintenance if anyone's got some questions. There's another before and after. Again, just a plain Besser brick wall and then transforming it. Those three areas are also a water feature. So it actually has running water. So they have the double benefits of running water and also plants. I think we're getting the hurry along.
We have had some information with the COVID that we are going to be masked up for 4 p.m. So the gentlemen are so exceptional at what they're delivering. But I'm also mindful that at 4 p.m. we have to mask up. So I'm trying to race them through and giving them signals from the side stage. So I apologise for doing that. 4 p.m. we have to wear masks inside the premises. So I'm just wrapping you up. But having said that, we'd love to invite you back to come and do a session separately for those who are interested in finding out more. The other question is, have you got any questions before we let these gentlemen go and obviously talk to you to the side individually? Any questions?
Is there any questions? You don't need to expect the hustle. I'm being cheeky.
Okay.
Thinking about what you were saying about this too, about how green draws people, and it does, and you've got people sitting in foyers where they don't normally sit in foyers. It seems to me this has a great deal of potential for areas where you can advertise yourself as to pull people in. Like restaurants do certain things to make people come into them and stay in them. You've got a great advertising line here. We can pull people in and keep them in. But the thing I was really wanting to ask you was, you've got an office building that's already been built, it's finished and done with. Can you come along and do something to any building?
Yeah, it's
It doesn't need to be designed.
Look, it's very easy to come into an area and look at. There's different things that you can do. So a great example, when you look at this space here, it's all irrigated, but the concrete planters that are over there, they're not connected to any irrigation. We actually installed a water reservoir at the base of those planters. So we fill them up once every 6 weeks, and then the water is actually moved up. So again, it's an easy option, also less maintenance intensive. It was so good that Mimi, who works here, didn't realise that and was watering them every week. And then at Christmas when I came in, they were almost overflowing, so that we had to drain out. And it was only a couple of weeks ago that they finally ran out of water, so they lasted for 5 months. But look, like anything, there's, any space can be transformed. It's just understanding the budget that you want to work with. And, by spending a little bit of extra money, you can make things a lot easier. Hope that answers your question.
Beautiful. Any other questions?
You talked about using low light understory plants, which are sort of typically rainforest type plants. Have you successfully done a native planting garden?
Yeah, we do. We use plenty of native plants.
Right.
There's actually, rainforest plants that are native to Australia. So is everyone familiar with staghorns and elkhorns? Natives, we actually use those in our walls. See, maiden hair fern, that's an argumentative point because it's in so many areas. But if you look around sort of northern Queensland, there's multiple different species there. We use lamandras, bakea, a whole variety of sort of different species. It's just using a variety of different species for the different areas. So you can use natives, but we like to mix in tropical plants as well. Some plants, asparagus, a mixture of things.
Do you try and get the sort of more drought-tolerant type plants? It sounds like a lot of the plants you use are actually water-reliant.
A mixture. Yeah, roof gardens, we use a lot of succulent species. It depends on the area. Like anything, we don't necessarily design to, say, a particular plant species. It's the environment of that we're using. So like anything, you can be outside in full sun, but as it moves across, you could have a 30-story building next to you. And also thinking about, is a building going to go up in 5 years' time, and trying to work within that. So we never try and restrict ourselves to, we look at the whole plant palette. We use everything there because we're environmentally designing. We're looking to design from nature within that area. And, on sides of the building, we're using lots of epiphytes, lots of orchids that actually don't require lots of moisture. Generally, when people think about water-intensive plants, it's because you're trying to keep the soil around there wet, because we're actually feeding water directly to the root system, and the felt actually retains a lot of moisture. The walls don't need a lot of water.
Wonderful. I think what we might do is bring the gentlemen down outside their plants in the second area here. If there are any one-on-one questions, please feel free to come over and have a discussion with them. But please put your hands together for the lovely Scott and James.
Thank you, Deb.
And they grace us with their presence regularly, and we don't mind at all. They do a wonderful job. So thank you, gentlemen.